Good afternoon, and welcome to the Wednesday afternoon conference call with Trusts Unlimited. This is Jim George speaking. I'm the non-attorney spokesman and facilitator for Trusts Unlimited, and I'd like to thank all of you for taking the time to listen to this call, particularly those of you calling in for the first time and those that will be listening to the replay over the next 24 to 48 hours. I would also appreciate it that if you are interested in the things we discuss here, that you hit the subscribe button and share our call with others that you think might be interested as well. This is going to be a little bit different call again today. There's just too much going on. Despite my best efforts, I have not been able to put everything together the way I ordinarily do. I like to have my ducks in a row, my thoughts laid out in progression, and that's not the case today. In the words of Rush Limbaugh, I'm sitting here with a stack of stuff all over the place, so I'm going to do my best to piece it together. I'm not quite sure where this thing's going to go today. A lot of what I say is going to be my own opinion, not necessarily the opinion of Trusts Unlimited. But it is what it is. I've been talking to people around the globe. I've been talking to people here in the United States. Situation in Iraq, the situation in this country, recent events of this week, all of which affect what we're doing here and things that are of interest to not only people that are holders of pre-valued currencies, and particularly the dinar, but just American citizens that are trying to figure out what the hell's going on in this country. It's really kind of unnerving, but I'm going to try to stay to the format as much as I can, and I'm going to start, of course, talking a little bit about the situation in Iraq. Today, of course, is March 13th, the Ides of March. Those of you that know your history understand the significance of the Ides of March, and things are going on in this country of a historic nature as well, although often you don't realize that what's happening is historic till you have some time to pass and you can look back and realize, well, my goodness, this was a turning point, or this was a critical juncture, things of that nature. But let's go ahead and get started and talk about what's going on in Iraq right now. First, by way of disclaimer, Trusts Unlimited is not the purveyor of the dinar and these other currencies. We're not advocating either the sale or purchase of these currencies, but as rather substantial currency holders ourselves. We're sharing with you the information we believe to be most relevant. The most relevant piece of information from our standpoint, of course, would be the reinstitution of the dinar in country, which we believe is the catalyst for the reinstitution of a number of pre-valued currencies. But there is a lot of progress in Iraq. The Parliament has approved an unprecedented 3-year budget, which goes, of course, to the Council of Ministers for a vote and then back to the Parliament. Soudani did make a statement saying that he expected full passage of the budget during Ramadan. Well, Ramadan this year is from March 22nd till April 21st. So we're looking at the outside of a 5-week period for the full passage of the budget. Now, as I've said in the past, in a perfect world, we'd see the reinstitution of the dinar simultaneous to the passage of the budget, which makes things nice and clean and simple. But, of course, that's not the way Iraq does business, unfortunately. And as I've said in the past, I do not believe that the rate is directly linked to the budget, meaning the rate could change prior to passage of the budget, the rate could change simultaneous to the budget, or the rate could change shortly after the passage of the budget, and adjustments could be made. But the fact that the budget looks as though it will be done at the outside within 5 weeks is very good news. We also know that the other issues that people believe have affected the reinstitution, Article 140 of the Constitution, the HCL, it seems that Baghdad and Erbil have come to a complete agreement on those issues, so they shouldn't be a factor either. Now, Sudani has made some other statements which suggest strongly that the reinstitution of the dinar is in the offing. He's advised his citizens, for example, to hold on to their dinar as he expects them to increase in value and therefore increase in purchasing power. He has also told citizens that they will be able to exchange the provisional 3-0 notes that they still may have in their possession for the new category small notes. Also, he said that the creation of the new electronic platform with the account cards being distributed to citizens is going to make it much easier for them to have access to their funds, their retirement plan, and the percentage that they will receive pursuant of revenue pursuant to the hydrocarbon law distributions. So all of this, once again, continues to point to the reinstitution of the dinar. And lastly, Sudani has entered into a number of bilateral trade and banking agreements that he's negotiated globally. And the issue is very simply this. When you institute bilateral trade and banking agreements, when you establish international contracts to rebuild the infrastructure, there are only two ways you can pay for that. You can only pay for that utilizing their U.S. reserve currency. Now, they have a substantial amount of USD in their reserve, but it's not enough to meet the needs to run the country and pay these contracts for the rebuilding of their infrastructure and implement the trade and banking, bilateral trade and banking agreements it's established. So there is going to either have to be a blend of the U.S. dollar and a reinstituted currency, or simply the use of their reinstituted currency. So all of these things point to the validity of what Sudani is doing, which is he's moving everything out of the way and moving toward the reinstitution of their currency. Now, there's nothing more really that I need to say about what's going on in Iraq. Any of us paying attention know pretty much what I've said here. I see no negatives on the horizon. The only other thing I can mention is that Sudani has pretty much dropped a hammer on Maliki. I don't think we have to play whack-a-mole with him any longer. I think he's done, and I think that the more radical faction of the coalition framework has been neutralized. And as a matter of fact, what Sudani has done is he is beginning to enter into agreements with Iran. So in so doing, he eliminates the interference that Iran has had and the corrupt pro-Iranian officials in the country, because he's gone to Iran and said, look, we're going to be a sovereign nation capable of standing on our own, so we're going to deal with you as equal partners. And so that in and of itself is going to eliminate a lot of the pilfering and the corrupt practices of some of the officials in country. Now, this is where this call is going to go a little bit awry, because I'm going to have to introduce a subject here that's kind of political in nature. Of course, our attorneys at Trusts Unlimited don't like that I do that. They want to stay neutral on these issues, but since the last presidential election, politics has reared its ugly head, and it's not anything that can be ignored. So I want to touch on this subject, and I have to go back a number of years to explain where I'm coming from here. Now, again, what I say and the conclusions I come to are my opinion, but there's a saying, a man with experience has nothing to fear from someone with a counter-argument expressing another opinion. And I've had a lot of experience. I have degrees in political science, macroeconomics, and finance. I've worked in these areas for nearly 40 years. I've also been a contributing member to 2 presidential commissions. I've worked in D.C. I've worked with a lot of individuals you see on the news on a regular basis. So I come at this from experience, not from someone standing outside just expressing an opinion. But unfortunately, the American people have been lied to for basically most of my adult life. It started in earnest, I would say, perhaps the late 60s, early 70s. And so I just want to review some of this with you because these lies have been told so often by so many people that we tend to believe it's the truth. When we hear something over and over again, we tend to believe it. There's even something called neuro-linguistic programming. That is the use of certain terms and phrases which make things more palatable for people to believe. So let's go back and let me review some of the things that we've had to deal with. I'm going to talk about basically the climate change situation, and I'm going to talk about the Green New Deal, and I'm going to talk about the attempt to centralize everything that we experience as American citizens in the private sector. So let's go back to the 70s. For those of you old enough to remember, we were told that there was going to be a pending ice age. And this is when the climate thing began. First, it began with an ice age. But the problem there is that the predictions were just hilariously wrong. So that evolved into the 80s. The concern was the ozone layer. We were losing the ozone layer, and then the sun was going to burn us up. That went nowhere. So then in the 90s, we were moved into the global warming situation, and we were given predictions about cities being underwater, the temperature being unbearable, not being able to plant food, et cetera, et cetera. Well, none of that came to light. So now, in the 21st century, it's now climate change, and that seems to work better for them because whatever happens, they can say, oh, that's climate change, and it's going to get a lot worse. But the simple truth of the matter is what affects the climate are two things: solar activity and the tilt of the Earth on its axis, which is a 26,000-year tilt. That's what affects the climate. But why were we told these pack of lies, and why do they persist in these lies? Because they need these lies in order to justify the establishment of their electric grid, their renewable system, and basically control of us. Let's talk about some of the things that they're doing. One, of course, is the lithium battery, which is used for their electric cars. Now, there is nothing worse for the environment than a lithium mine. I suggest you Google lithium mining and look for yourself what is done to the earth versus what's involved in getting petroleum or natural gas is just unbelievable. Next, we move to wind and solar. Now, what do solar panels do? They take a lot of space and they're extremely inefficient. That limits what land can be used for other purposes. And then we have the windmills. Again, extremely inefficient, extremely unenvironmental. As a matter of fact, solar panels and windmills are completely and totally non-biodegradable, meaning once they're of no further use, despite what's involved in producing them, we have nowhere to put them. They're basically doing exactly what they claimed happened with petroleum. Recently, we found out with the wind turbines that they kill approximately 500,000 birds a year. And now, since they put the turbines along the northern shore, northeastern coastline, what's happening? Beached whales. These things are not environmentally sound. We're being lied to. Now, there's a reason I'm discussing all of this. Now, let's go to petroleum. Petroleum is an organic substance. It's created from the interaction of algae, plants, and bacteria. There's only one thing on the planet that we have in greater amounts than petroleum, and that's literally water. We would never be able to exhaust the amount of petroleum on this planet. And again, it's an organic substance, and it's unlimited. But there's more. When you hear President Biden say things like, we're going to end fossil fuels, if you are an informed person, you can only come to a couple of conclusions. Either he's lying or he's a fool. Only about 40% of petroleum is used in the combustion engine and in engines in general. Fully 60% of petroleum is used in the production of glass, plastics, textiles, pharmaceuticals, electronics, and all of the nanotechnologies we rely on. There is not enough wind and solar in the universe to produce one smartphone. It's just that simple. This is why they have to repeat the lie every day. Of course, they have assistance, from their myrmidons in the media, and that's the only word I can think of to accurately describe these people in the media. They're myrmidons. If you're an historian, you know what that word means. But let's move on to President Biden and his particular strain of lies, because this man is the prince of liars. As a matter of fact, he had to withdraw from 2 presidential campaigns because he was caught plagiarizing. He was a proud segregationist. Today he's running around saying that the Republicans are trying to destroy Social Security, but a lot of individuals don't know that he actually wrote the bill to tax Social Security benefits. He's been on both sides of every issue, whether it's segregation, whether it's protection of Social Security, whether it's on gay marriage, whether it's on fossil fuels. You can just Google it. It's right there. He's been on every side of every issue. But let's just review what he's done as president. He ended the Keystone Pipeline. He basically orchestrated a failed retreat in Afghanistan, resulting in the death of 13 Americans. And now Afghanistan is worse than it ever was, despite 20 years of blood, sweat, and tears in that country. He's opened our border, and we've had over 5 million people enter this country illegally. In the process, his government has spent $7 trillion, requiring massive printing from the Federal Reserve. This has in turn created inflation at highest it's been in 45 years. That has slowed the travel of goods and services, which has resulted in a severe supply chain issue. Even baby food, to this day, people are still having difficulty finding baby food. And of course, when people were upset about this, his response was the red speech. If you remember that speech, he's standing there with a blood-red background, waving his fists with 2 silhouetted armed military standing behind him. I mean, how much more obvious does it have to be? Trump got a lot of criticism for his tweets, and I was one of the people that criticized him. I understand where he was coming from. His family was being attacked and slandered every day. But he won the argument, the policy argument, so he was punching down. But you know what Trump didn't do? He never went after the American citizen and the American voter. Joe Biden, who claimed to be a great uniter, just never wastes an opportunity to go after those that didn't vote for him, those that disagree with him. He calls them all kinds of names. Then, of course, we have the Ukraine fiasco. The same people that couldn't provide Trump with $4 billion to finish the wall have sent over $100 billion to the Ukraine. And then, of course, there's the destruction of the Nord Stream pipeline, which was an act of war. So the country is not well served by this administration. Then, of course, there was the establishment of 87,000 new IRS agents, and pursuant to Executive Order 14067, the creation of a central bank digital currency. None of this has been done for our benefit. Now, we're being told that we needed 87,000 agents to audit the billionaires that weren't paying their fair share. There's 752 billionaires in America. Do we really need 87,000 agents to audit of the 752 billionaires, the ones that aren't paying their fair share? I don't think so. But then he decided that we were going to go after the corporations that were paying no taxes. Well, let me digress for a second. Economics is the study of the production, distribution, and consumption of goods and services. It's like a three-legged stool. If any one of those legs is weakened or breaks, obviously the stool doesn't work. Well, when you go after the corporations, you're going after 1/3 of the equation for the economy, production. Now let's take a look at exactly what he's saying. Every time we have reduced taxes, revenues to the federal government have gone up. Why then would you want to punish production? Because the left wants to grow government, not the private sector. A profitable, independent private sector threatens the left because their philosophy is centralized everything. So let's take the example of corporations that pay no taxes. Corporations make a profit or they cease to exist. So how can a corporation in a given year pay no taxes? I will tell you how. By spending the money legitimately on a tax-deferred or tax-exempt basis. Capital expenditures, business expansion, depreciation, all of these things are legitimate ways to reduce tax exposure. So when a corporation pays no taxes in a year, that means that they expanded their business and hired more people. So you expand your business and you build additional factories or improve factories, and you contract someone to do that work. Well, the money that you paid them was deductible to the corporation, but the money that you paid them was taxable to the people you paid. So the taxes were paid. They were shifted. When that corporation hires 15 or 20% more employees, the salaries that they pay those employees are deductible to the corporation, but the salaries that were paid to those employees are taxable events. Now, the left, the Democrats, Biden, they know this. They're lying because they have an agenda. And again, there's a reason I'm bringing all this up. Now, let's move on and talk about the events of this week. For example, the failure of the Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Banks. Now, what has Biden done as a result of this? He's attempting basically to nationalize the banking system because this is what the left does. They want to nationalize and centralize everything. Their problem with the oil industry is it's not nationalized. It's not run by the government. An oil company does what? It explores for oil. It drills for the oil. It refines the oil, and then it distributes the oil. And for all of that effort, they make 9 cents approximately per gallon in profits. The federal government does nothing but get in the way, and they get 18 cents per gallon. They make twice as much as the actual oil company that does the work, and that's still not good enough for them. But let's talk about the banking situation. Joe Biden comes into office, spends, i.e. borrows, $7 trillion over and above what we're normally spending in 2 years. This creates inflation. As a result, the Feds, frankly, who waited too long, increase necessarily interest rates to try to stave the inflation. And what happened to Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank? Well, they were positioned entirely wrong, and they seemed, for whatever reason, because they were so involved in their woke little agenda, that they weren't doing their job, and the regulators weren't doing their job either. The company invested heavily in the ESG companies, the environmental and social governance companies, which, of course, are all failing, and they had a large position in U.S. long-term bonds. Well, what happens to long-term bonds when interest rates go up? The value of the bonds goes down. Bonds move inversely to interest rates. So these companies were poorly managed, and the regulators didn't do their job and alert these banks that they had to change position. The result is the banks have no liquidity. So what did Biden do? He went out there and said, we will make sure that all of the account holders at these banks are made whole. Well, that's not how it works. The way it works is you're insured up to $250,000. It turns out that these banks were in Silicon Valley, and these people, 90% of these people at these banks had more than $250,000 in the bank. But Biden's going to make them whole, which means he's basically going to deplete the FDIC fund, the same thing he did with our reserve oil. These people are irresponsible. They're doing damage, and they're blaming us for it. The centralization has been attempted my entire adult life. Examples of that would be Hillary Care, and then, of course, Obamacare. As a matter of fact, Obama wanted to start a federal police force. He gave in a speech, it was 2007 or 2008, said we need a federal police force the size of our national military. Now, that police force isn't there to defend the country. That police force is there to police the citizens of the United States who, by the way, he thought should not be in possession of a firearm. That is the classic definition of a police state. Then, of course, during the Trump administration, during the hashtag resist movement, they began the defund the police. What was the purpose of that? They were trying to thread the needle. By creating chaos and crime in the cities and counties and states, they were hoping that people would demand a federal police force, but it didn't work. The people finally were smart enough to say, no, we don't want a federal police force. We want a local police force. And a lot of the politicians who defended and implemented defund the police movements have lost their jobs. So that's good news. But basically, despite their best efforts, the left thus far has not been able to overcome their greatest single obstacle, and that's the Constitution of the United States. And that's what I want to discuss now, because if you are a Dinarian, or you're an American citizen without possessing dinar or any other currencies, you need to protect yourself from the federal government and their attempts to deny you basically your civil liberties. Now, we've discussed over the last, actually over 10 years, the establishment of our family package of asset protection trust exclusively to individuals that possess dinar. And I'm sure that most of the people that listen to our calls are dinarians or people that hold these currencies. But this strategy and this family package of trusts, in my opinion, at this time, is a necessary component for anyone that wants to retain their privacy and control their wealth. Because we're living in a high-tax, high-surveillance state, But fortunately, there are aspects within the Constitution which protect us. And basically, what's going to happen, in my opinion, and this goes far beyond our calls, Dinarians, and all of that, there are going to be two kinds of people in this country. People that understand and have exercised their constitutional rights to stave off the high-tax, high-surveillance states, and those that have not done so. I want to talk briefly about two things before we get into the trust. First, the contract clause of our Constitution, and second, the Fourth Amendment. I want to read the contract clause. The contract clause of the United States, Article 1, Section 10, Clause 1 of the Constitution, quote, "No state shall enter into any treaty, alliance, or confederation, grant letters of marque or reprisal, coin money, emit bills of credit, make anything but gold and silver coin, a tender in payment of debts, pass any bill of attainder, ex post facto law, or law impairing the obligation of contracts, or grant any title of nobility." Now, this is a very important clause. It's very short, and I want to explain to you that at least half of this country is living in a post-constitutional age, and they're simply ignoring this. Let's go through this. No state shall enter into any treaty, alliance, or confederation. Well, what was the Civil War? A fight against the Confederate States. They created a confederation basically to leave the country. It cannot grant letters of marque or reprisal. In other words, the government can't hire individuals, pay them a bounty to go after any individual or group. Emit bills of credit means they can't give interest-free loans. Can't make anything but gold or silver as tender, and they cannot pass any bill of attainder. A bill of attainder means declaring any individual or group of individuals traitors without formal charge. Well, what do we have? January 6th. All these individuals allegedly committed insurrection, and they're being held against their will without being presented to a judge. That's a bill of attainder. It's unconstitutional. Ex post facto law, I've discussed this. They can't pass a law after an individual's done something they don't like in order to retroactively go after that person. And lastly, impair the obligation of contracts. In other words, when you enter into a legal contract in good faith, the government can't nullify that contract. Well, that's exactly what they're trying to do by forgiving all of these college loans. They're just ignoring the Constitution. And lastly, grant any title of nobility. In other words, we don't have an elite. We are all equal citizens. When you hold an office, it's not a title. It's an office. You are still a citizen. No better, no worse than anyone else. All of these things that are being done right now are in clear violation of the Constitution. But we can protect ourselves. The Fourth Amendment of the Constitution, quote, "The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall be issued but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons and the things to be seized." Now, our trust package is basically the ultimate tool to ensure that your Fourth Amendment rights are upheld, and particularly with, in my opinion, the single most important thing that can threaten that, and that is the creation of a central bank digital currency. A central bank digital currency is absolute behavioral control. At least that's the attempt. Now, there are ways we can minimize what they're trying to do. I've discussed this in the past, transitioning to tangible assets that produce income, real estate investment trusts, things of that nature. Of course, the dividends and interest that they generate would be in the system. And there are actually even ways we can get around that are a little bit more exotic. But for the average individual, if the substantial amount of your wealth is not in banking or financial assets, but in income-producing tangible assets, you can substantially reduce the control over you that they're attempting. Now, they're trying to get around this as well. They're trying to do two other things that are wholly unconstitutional. One, in anticipation of your transition to tangible assets, is to create a wealth tax. That is not to tax capital gains, dividends, and interest, but to literally assess a tax on your net worth. This is unconstitutional. They're going to try it, but it's unconstitutional. And the worst one of all is an additional tax on unrealized capital gains. So if you, for example, let's say you have a tract of land that you use for hunting. I'll just try to make an example. You're not going to improve the land. You're not going to do anything to it. It's a large tract of land. You're using it for hunting. And let's say that land was worth $1 million. Well, next year that land is worth $1.1 million, an increase in value on paper of $100,000. What the federal government wants to do is tax you on that $100,000 gain. You haven't sold the property. You haven't improved the property. You're receiving income from individuals that utilize it for hunting, and you pay taxes on that, but they want you to pay tax on the unrealized increase in value. It's unconstitutional, but they don't care. They don't care. Now, they will ultimately be defeated in the process because we still have the Supreme Court doing its job. Biden has the worst batting average of any president in my lifetime. He's lost 2 cases, 9-0. And I think he's going to lose the case having to do with forgiving these college loans, an absurd notion. But again, the reason they're doing this is because they want to transition, once again, to centralized education by making all education free, which doesn't mean it's free. It means they're just going to make the taxpayer pay for it. And these colleges are going to be enriched all the more for it. But, of course, your kids won't be educated. You're going to get the government line. Hopefully, this is going to be stopped as well. Now, again, the reason I've gone into all of this is so that you understand that having currencies or having any asset that you're going to appreciate substantially means that you need to transfer the asset out of title to a trust prior to its appreciation. But because of all of these other things that I've discussed here, every American needs to avail themselves of their Family Asset Protection Trust package, which is a contract protected under the contract clause of the Constitution. Now, I want to walk through briefly the benefits of the trust package, whether you're a Dinarian or not. And if you are a Dinarian, you need to establish this trust package prior to the revaluation of this dinar, of the dinar and these other currencies globally. And you are running out of time. That's a good thing for those of us. That's a good thing for all of us, but particularly for those of us who understands the need for getting their affairs in order, their trust in place, and have assigned their currencies on paper to that trust. So by establishing this trust, you're going to preserve your privacy and your anonymity. Now, if you're a Dinarian or anyone that's got an asset that you think is going to appreciate substantially, you want to get it into trust prior to its appreciation. But for all Americans, in this environment, protecting your privacy and your anonymity is important. Second reason it's a good idea to establish this trust is because it'll help to avoid IRS scrutiny. Now, by transferring your pre-RV currencies to the trust, you will have transferred the taxable event of the revaluation from yourself personally to the trust. That substantially limits the IRS's ability to audit you, and it basically eliminates a 6-year audit, which is very important. But it also means, whether you're a Dinarian or not, if you have your wealth in the trust and everything's transacted within the trust, the only thing you'll be taxed for personally are the dividends and interest that you receive from the trust. Third thing that the trust does is it establishes a separate gift trust fund. Now, for those of you that are Dinarians, this means Not only will you be able to avoid the federal gift tax by gifting currencies prior to the revaluation, but if you gift to friends and family through the gift sub-trust, you will have complete control of the post-RV proceeds, and those proceeds will be protected along with yours. But if you're not a dinarian, you can utilize this gift sub-trust to create life estates for friends and family. In other words, the trust will own homes, cars, vacation homes, boats, etc., which you can give to friends and family during their lifetime as a life estate, but it is still owned by the trust. Fourth, by establishing this trust, whether you're a dinarian or not, you're going to be able to avoid the cost and delay of probate and the federal estate tax. Probate ordinarily can take anywhere from 6 to 18 months. If your estate's being challenged, it can be tied up for months, years, and even decades, and that means your heirs will have no access to their respective estates until the probate process is completed. Then there's something called the federal estate tax, the tax that the federal government would assess in order for that estate to be transferred to heirs. Under current law, approximately the first 10 million of your estate would bypass any federal estate tax, but the balance could be taxed as much as 65%. However, if your estate is in trust, in our trust package, the federal estate tax will be zero, meaning you will be able to transfer 100 cents on the dollar to your heirs. And lastly, this trust is structured in such a way as to make it extremely expensive and extremely time-consuming for anyone to pursue civil litigation against you, meaning just about any lawsuit will be stopped as soon as they understand that your trust is structured in such a way that these individuals would literally have to go to Wyoming, have to post a bond, have to hire a Wyoming attorney as an out-of-state plaintiff. You're probably looking at $500 or $600 an hour for these people. Once this attorney finds out your assets are in our trust package, they're probably not going to want to work on a retainer. They're going to want an upfront substantial payment. So that's going to make these litigations disappear. So for all of these reasons, it's important, whether you're a dinarian or not, to establish this trust. When it comes to civil litigation or even IRS litigation, it's important to understand that under our system of civil procedure, it's when you hold assets in direct title that you can lose control of them or lose them outright. And it's invariably at those times in life that you need and want control. If you've lived for any length of time, you've either experienced in your own life things like unexpected divorce, permanent incapacitation, the onset of dementia, premature death, and prolonged and complicated probate processes. Then there are, of course, investment losses, business losses, and bankruptcies. The number 2 loss of wealth now in the aggregate, courtesy of the information age, is identity theft. But the number 1 loss of personal wealth remains confiscation through civil litigation. Anything you own in direct title can be taken from you. So in point of fact, the only way that you can manage, protect, and control everything, and along with retaining ownership, but the only way, again, that you can control everything at all times and in all circumstances is through the establishment of our package of irrevocable trusts, and particularly like if you have an asset like these currencies that you anticipate a substantial increase in value. And we at Trust Unlimited will do everything we can to help you accomplish your personal and financial objectives, both pre- and post-RV, as we understand them. Now, our trust package is initially a package of 10 trusts, which consists of one master trust that will hold your assigned currencies pre-RV, although it can hold other assets like precious metals and cryptos. Some individuals have even assigned Iraqi stocks. This master trust will also hold financial assets like bank accounts and investment accounts post-RV, and is authorized to manage all the other sub-trusts. The package also contains the optional gift sub-trust. I've explained its purpose, But if that's not what you want, it can be converted to a standard subtrust, and then 8 additional standard subtrusts to hold additional assets like homes, cars, boats, etc. Now, this trust package is the simplification of a rather sophisticated trust package that we've utilized for our more affluent clients, a package that had an initial cost of anywhere from $6,000 to $10,000. But when we decided to work with Dinarians, we knew that price tag would be unaffordable for too many. So by simplifying the package, we've been able to reduce the cost to $3,000. There are a number of ways you can pay for that. You pay us up front, we'll discount the price further to $2,500, saving you an additional $500. If that's not possible, we even have a deferred payment arrangement. You'd make an initial payment of $525, which sum would basically offset our out-of-pocket cost just to produce and deliver your trust package to you. The balance of the $3,000 would then be paid in $100 monthly installments. We will charge no interest. The only proviso is that once the dinar reinstitutes and revalues globally, any unpaid balance would then need to be paid within 30 days. Now, with this approach, anyone that has currencies should be able to afford getting their affairs in order and their trust in force pre-RV for all of the reasons we've stated here. One other thing, you're not limited to 8 subtrusts. You can have as many as you need in the future, and the only additional cost to this trust package would be the rather nominal paralegal fees to either make changes to your trust or to fund the subtrusts. I'll give you one example. Let's say post-RV, you contact us. You say, you know what, I bought a beach house on Hilton Head Island, and I want to create a subtrust to protect it. So to create hypothetically, the Hilton Head Island real estate subtrust would only cost you between $150 and $250. That home might be worth $1 million, but it'll only cost you between $150 or $250 to protect that house into perpetuity in trust. So if the things we've discussed here are of interest to you, whether you're a Dinarian or not, I strongly suggest you contact us to get our initial no-obligation package. The package contains a lot of information about us, about the currencies, about these trusts. You can review the package. If you have any questions, you can contact us. We'll be happy to assist you. There will be no consultation fee, but everything you need, if you wish to proceed, is included in the package. Again, you're not obligated in any way, but everything you need is right there in the package. If you are interested in our package, you can go to our website, or rather, if you're interested in learning more about Trusts Unlimited, you can go to our website. That's Trusts with an S, Unlimited, LLC.com. If you would like to receive one of our trust packages, you can contact us by phone or email. Our email address is trusts with an S, unlimited, LLC @gmail.com. And our phone service is 307-274-4122. Contact us. We'll get the package out to you. If you have any questions, we'll be happy to assist you. And if you wish to proceed, everything you need is right there in the package. So we're going to go ahead and go to the Q&A here in just a moment. Let me open this up. So if you have any questions, once I open the Q&A, I'm happy to assist you. Again, if you wish to get one of our packages, you can contact us by email or phone. Our email address is trusts with an S, unlimited, LLC @gmail.com. And our phone service is 307-274-4122. Okay, our first caller today is area code 415. That's 415. Go ahead.
Great day to you. It's always a pleasure to speak with you, Jim. Thank you so much. And before I want 3 things I really appreciate that you're doing the explanation, educational, and about trust. because no other company does that. And that's totally awesome. And the way that you do it in a presentation form, even the young kids or people, I should say, to be politically correct, that they can understand and grow. So it's very huge. And number two, the thing about the Middle East, you covered everything except for what I just gleaned, that the Middle East is actually coming together peacefully. They're not fighting. So it is substantiated by the reevaluations as a whole in the Middle East. Number three, your presentation about the trust. I have someone listening, and I was telling them I was hoping that you'd covered it, but in terms of if we go to a constitutional law, how the trust works in terms of you don't have to redo your trust. It's just, it's already set up under constitutional law. So I thank you. This is Al. Total awesome pleasure, and I'll be listening in the background.
Well, thanks for your call, and that was not a paid advertisement. Al said all that on his own. First, with regard to the Middle East, you're right, and there's even talks now between Saudi Arabia and Iran, and that's very good development because those are really the two that the Saudis are Sunni and the Iranians are 12th Imam or Shia, which are the most radical Shia. So the fact that while they may disagree from a sectarian standpoint in Islam, they are talking about their common needs and everything. So that's very good too. You also mentioned trusts. There are some trusts out there, if you go to our website, that you need to avoid. So yes, a trust is a contract, and a properly structured trust is going to provide the protections I described. But there are some trusts out there that have been flagged. There is a constitutional trust that's been flagged. There's a pure trust that's been flagged. There's a non-grantor trust. So if you go to our website, you can find out a little bit more about that. But our trust package was authored by our attorney, Robert Bly. He's been a practicing attorney for over 40 years, specializing in the areas of estate planning, asset protection, and offshore planning. He's an internationally known estate planner, so our trust is a very well-respected trust. We've had a number of attorneys that have reviewed the trust who actually are trust attorneys contact us and told us that it's the best trust product they've ever seen. It incorporates offshore language. Some of the things in other trusts that are black letter law, and we meticulously avoid things that the IRS has declared are gray areas. So that's the case there. But thanks so much for your call. I greatly appreciate it, Al. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Our next caller is area code 347. That's 347. Go ahead.
Yeah, this is Praveen from New York. Also, I heard this week that China brokered a peace deal between Iran and Saudi Arabia. Will that help the RV then?
The peace deal is good news for the Middle East. It certainly should help the RV because remember, the UN and the IMF, they're the Article 8 compliance. They want peace in the area. They don't want neighbors fighting, so that's good as well. However, it's kind of bad for the United States because two things have basically happened in the last couple of years. Actions of the United States, unfortunately, have pushed Russia and China closer together, and the United States basically abandoning the Middle East has created a vacuum for China to fill. So from the standpoint of a denarian, it's good news. From the standpoint of peace in the Middle East, it's good news. From the standpoint of geopolitical influence of the United States, it's not particularly good news, but it is what it is.
Thank you.
Sure. Our next caller is area code 810. That's 810. Go ahead.
Hi, Jim.
Hello.
Hi, this is Diane.
Hi, Diane.
I have just a quick question in regards to the trust when we were applying for the EIN number. and I applied for the trust, for the gift trust. Well, and I realized later on I put just the gift trust. I didn't put gift sub-trust. Does that matter? Does that make a difference?
No. As long as you put the name of this, it should say the XYZ gift trust. It shouldn't have the word sub-trust in there, but I don't think that's an issue if the word sub isn't in there, because it identifies the fiduciaries within the trust, and if it's, I don't think that should be a problem.
Okay. And one other question, because when I was taking my paperwork to get it notarized, I know you said that it should have been like 20, maybe close to 20 pages that should have been notarized.
Well, I think there was 20 total. I don't think there were 20 that needed to be notarized.
Okay. All right, then. That's all I need to know. Thank you very much.
Sure. Certainly.
All right.
Okay. Bye now. One other thing I will mention for the sub-trust, the real critical thing is that the EIN and everything is in order on the master trust, because if you read, when you get our trust package, one of these supplemental documents you'll get is something called the exchange protocol if you have a trust. When you go to the bank to do your exchange, you won't even take the gift sub-trust with you. You will only take what the law requires, the master trust, the 3 bank documents that are in the back of the trust, and the assignment form which shows your currencies are assigned to the trust. That's what they need in order for you to negotiate your exchange rate and establish a master trust bank account at the point of exchange that day at that bank. You will go back later with the gift sub-trust, so you don't have to have the EIN number right away. We want people to get the EIN right away just in case there's a conflict with someone that may have the same or close to name, and then you're denied the EIN number. But again, it's critical that you have the EIN number for the master trust. We can work around difficulties with the gift sub-trust. So basically, that's it for today. We have no additional calls. I'd like to thank all of you for taking the time to listen to this call. Again, if the things we've discussed today are of interest to you, I strongly suggest you contact us to get our initial no-obligation package. It does contain everything you need if you wish to proceed, but you're under no obligation. You can review the package. Contact us if you have any questions. We'll be happy to assist you, and there will be no consultation fee. Of course, our next call is scheduled for next Wednesday. Certainly, if something of a dramatic nature were to happen between now and then, we'll try to get out an emergency email and schedule an emergency conference call. But failing that, we'll be back next Wednesday, noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. Thanks so much for listening, everyone, and have a great week. Bye-bye.